Ready? Good evening and welcome to Wednesday, March 15, 2023, 6 p.m. regular Planning Commission meeting. The meeting now will come in order. We have a conflict of interest recusal. Commissioners, please announce any items that you are recusing for due to conflict of interest prior to the item being heard. The invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be given by Ms. Mosayed, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Ms. Flores. Mr. Flores. Anybody that? Stand, please.
Dear Lord, we thank you for the ability to come before you with this commission. We invite you to be here with us this evening to grant us the wisdom with each and every case and situation that is presented before us tonight. In your name we pray.
Now for the Pledge of Allegiance, please place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica, will you give me a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barcena?
Present.
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 Vice Chairperson Villalobos
Present.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Present. Public comment is now open for item listed on the Planning Commission agenda. Secretary, please announce the instruction of the public participation.
The members of the public will now have an opportunity to speak on items listed on the Planning Commission agenda. Please state your name for the record. Each speaker written comments are limited to 3 minutes. Callers wishing to make a comment may do so at this time by dialing *9 from your phone. When instructed, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Individuals joining through the Zoom app may request to make a comment by using the raise hand feature on Zoom and select to unmute the microphone icon when instructed. And at this time, Chairperson, we do not have anyone wishing to speak, nor do we receive any speaker cards.
Okay, if there is no objection by the Planning Commission, I will close public participation. No objections. Close. Consent calendar item number 1 will now move to consent calendars. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to pull an item for separate discussions? No. Might entertain a motion to approve the item 1 and 2 on the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the minutes of the February 15, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
Secretary, give me a roll call, please. Just to make it official.
Sorry, do we have a second?
Oh, I need a second, sorry.
I second the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that we have a first and second, I'll go ahead and take a roll call. Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Rosa,
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Villalobos,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes,
And this is to approve, there was only one item under the consent calendar.
thank you. The discussion item, I guess will be number 2 and number 3, the sidewalk update. We might have staff report. The presentation will be given by Stephen Jones, city planner.
Yes. Good evening, Chair Rivera and Commissioners. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Stephen Jones, for the record, City Planner. And this discussion item was placed on the agenda as an update that was requested by the by the commission with regard to the city's actions for sidewalk vending. On this past Monday, March 13th, the City Council considered introducing ordinance number 932, amending chapter 5.56 sidewalk vending of the Belgardez Municipal Code to account for inconsistencies with the State Senate Bill 946. So staff recommends that you just receive and file this report. The specific learning objectives of this report are to discuss the brief history of the city's ordinances regulating sidewalk vending, the street vending state law, and current and planned city activity. So the purpose of the ordinance we have now, Ordinance 914, which is current, is regulating street vending to help protect residents, protect businesses, decrease city vulnerabilities regarding liability and food safety, and last but not least, protecting the Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility. So there needs to be public right-of-way access for all residents. And on September 17th, 2018, then Governor Brown signed Senate Bill 946, which decriminalized sidewalk vending throughout the state. So the state has their regulations and the cities and counties must follow suit. So this law limited local regulations to those regulations only directly related to health and safety objectives and objective health, safety, and welfare regulations. So on the whole, it condensed what the city could do in terms of protecting residents and businesses and maintaining safe access to the public rights of way. So this week, the Community Development Director provided an update to the City Council based on community feedback that had been happening or occurring recently. The state's changes to decriminalize sidewalk vending. And there were concerns that sidewalk vendors lacked encouragement to obtain permits and licenses, along with accessibility issues and just the general state of our public rights of way. So the director addressed some of those concerns by saying we're going to update our enforcement activity and what the current ordinance allows or even requires in terms of liens and penalties. So the director noted an internal memo and a flyer in English, which we can share on the screen for residents and businesses alike, that we're going to promote so that we could help reconcile what staff is doing in terms of enforcement. So again, our ordinances are going to change, or rather the street vending ordinance is going to change to remove liens and impounding private property. And so that was introduced this week so that the City Council will agendize on a future agenda the actual introduction and ultimately approval, if approved, and effectiveness of that new ordinance, which is ordinance number 932. So the proposed ordinance again would say that to be consistent with state law, we need to take out some of the penalties, including liens and impounding vehicles. So that won't occur, but we'll still be looking for sidewalk vendors to get public health licenses and to get business licenses to operate in the city, and to also be mindful of and aware of those accessibility issues that need to remain forefront so that folks have the access and the Americans with Disabilities Act is not thwarted. So beyond that, the enforcement will continue. There will be changes to the ordinance and businesses and residents will be protected. So ordinance number 914 was introduced back in 2021. And that's, again, the current one we have now. The council heard and authorized a proposed change in the city's ordinance to be consistent with state law. And we are still, the city is still enforcing the current law and will be more consistent with state law once that ordinance number 932, the new ordinance, is approved. So we also have our very capable city attorneys, Deputy City Attorney Stephanie Vasquez and Susie Altamirano, on hand to answer questions. They were able to provide an update to the council on Monday as well, along with the Community Development Director. And that concludes my presentation. We are available for questions.
Does any members of the planning commission have any questions or comments?
Yes, lots of questions. So my first question, so as I was reading through, I noticed that one of the chief complaints or concerns from the vendors is that it's very difficult for them to obtain permits from the health department. I understand why brick and mortar businesses have to have health department permits. They have restrooms, they have kitchens, they have dining rooms, areas that, you know, occupancy that needs to be maintained and cleaned and safe for people that walk in to sit there and eat. It doesn't seem that those things would particularly apply to the street vendors. They don't have kitchens and bathrooms and dining rooms and things like that that need to be maintained. So my question is, in other cities, do street vendors in other cities also have to have a health permit? That's a requirement?
Yes, state requirements as well as the county. So it's the county's, obviously, public health is the county's jurisdiction, and they would have to get those as well.
Okay.
Other
Yeah.
cities.
And do we know what specifically is difficult for them? But I mean, if other vendors in other cities can get health permits.
And mind you, excuse me for interrupting, some cities have their own health departments, but those that
Right.
don't would defer to public health for the county.
LA
So
County, right,
what specifically is the barrier?
right.
I don't know. And what we've said or committed to is assisting where we can when vendors come in. That's a part of the reason for the flyer, is to say, bring the questions and concerns to us so that we can reach out to the appropriate parties in the county and make those connections or figure out what's going on and where the disconnect lies. So that flyer does give a little bit of more information for our staff to help and assist in ways that they may or may not be familiar with in terms of making those connections.
Right. My next question has to do with hours of operation. So I was noticing that the hours of operation, the established hours, are from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. In lots of other cities, particularly in Cudahy, I don't know if you're aware, but in Cudahy, there's one street down there, Patata, which is the eastbound side of Salt Lake Avenue, which is an industrial area. They happen to have food stands and food trucks and stands on that street specifically. You don't see them all around the city. And I think that having something like that within this Bell Garden city limits would help to alleviate some of the concerns that the brick and mortar businesses have about having people right outside of their businesses. And also in terms of hours of operation, it seems to me that most of the vendors are setting up in the evening, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And is there a possibility of setting up hours of operation that are within the hours that most brick and mortar businesses are already closed, particularly on the weekends? I mean, I know, and I don't know about you, but when I go out on the weekend, after a night out on the weekend, what I want is tacos at 2 a.m. or at 1 a.m., right? So I think that it's that type of street vending lends itself to that clientele. And I think that perhaps it's something that we should think about to have within city limits, have maybe a specific area, designated area where vendors can set up, have extended hours, let's say from, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. or, in an area that isn't necessarily going to be disturbing residents and that isn't necessarily going to be in front of another business, of a brick and mortar restaurant, a dining area.
Commissioner,
So-
would you? It's
Commissioner Gomez, I'm sorry, Stephen, would you mind if I address this question?
at all, please.
Commissioner Gomez, this is Susie Altamirano with the City Attorney's Office, and your comments and suggestions are duly noted. And this is an issue that is happening not just within Southern California, but statewide as far as addressing street vendor issues on both sides of the aisle, right? For the brick and mortar and for the street vendors themselves. And to take a step back, SB 946 does have specific regulations. Happy to provide that legislation for you. One of them is the city cannot designate a specific location only for street vendors, for instance. And there's exceptions to that rule and particularities. These are questions that were initially addressed in 2019, 2020 with an ad hoc committee through the city of Bell Gardens. And currently, with the, as Stephen had mentioned, what city council had addressed on Monday was to revisit the ordinance and make sure it's compliant with state law, SB 946, which was passed in 2019, and to go through it and ask, are we enforcing? Are we doing the steps preliminarily before we get to any type of enforcement? And so those include educating street vendors and then educating, even the brick and mortars, and educating members of the public. So those, for instance, you brought up hours of operation. That is something that the city council is considering, but preliminarily, what they're looking right now is, let's educate the public. Let's educate the street vendors. So code enforcement is handling notices of violation, which is essentially a warning, but also educating them as to the permitting process. And as Stephen has mentioned, every city is required to follow the permitting process if they are regulated by LA County. So across the board, they're similarly situated as City of Bell Gardens is. So for tonight, the purpose of this was to provide an update of where the city council is at as far as making sure, number one, the municipal code is compliant with state law, and we're doing that. As Stephen has mentioned, we removed two components. One, property cannot be impounded, including their push cart or any type of equipment they might have cannot be impounded. And two, no liens on real property. That was a prior regulation under state law, under SB 946, that is no longer allowed. That is no longer enforceable. Penalties include administrative fines. There is no criminal penalties, but it is administrative fines. There is a myriad of other issues that come subsequent to that because they don't have a permit. They might not have identification, right? And so if they are fined, for instance, or a notice of violation is issued, or a ticket is issued, even the enforcement of that could be difficulty. But again, we're not there. The city and the code enforcement is right now in the preliminary steps of educating and enforcing the ordinance that's on within the Muni Code.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Altamirano. I would just add that we are not, so let's talk about Calle Patata or Patata Street. There's nothing that precludes a group getting together and organizing and getting to us and figuring out ways to look at the way Cudahy did their street. And it's not on the street, but it's on the private property. So those private property rights could then, and that's where the planning commission would come in, because most of the street vending obviously is in the public right of way. The jurisdiction falls with public works and code enforcement. But when you have something like Patata Street or something like where I came from in Riverside, it was the city of Riverside, they dedicated private property to help with having a place where the food trucks could be. And that was a private property thing where they got the right entitlements and were able to come up with the development standards that said, we have outside seating, we have parking, and everything was meant and designed to not be a burden on the public right of way. And so that type of activity could exist in the City of Bell Gardens if there was a will for the people or the business vendors to organize and figure out where that's going to be. It wouldn't necessarily be a city-sponsored or city-owned property. It could be. There's not out of the realm of possibility. But those types of things are unique and popping up in different areas. Like I said, you mentioned Cudahy. I saw it in Riverside, and so those things could be addressed if a group wanted to get together. Staff's here to help them in terms of the planning department, and so that we would look at ways to come up with development standards that would help to alleviate some of the problems that are occurring to the public right of way specifically. So Patata Street is a good example.
And if you don't mind, there is a very important point of clarification. That activity is not legal. So that should be noted, that activity going on on Patata Street is not legal. So that's between the city of Cudahy, and it also involves the city of Bell Gardens. That would involve an enforcement issue. So just wanted to point that out.
No problem. Thank you. Yes, for making that this distinction. They are working on the ordinance to help them get illegal activities legal. And so there's going to be a spot on private property that the city's working with them on an ordinance for. So again, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but being in the street is not what we're advocating for.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Thanks.
Mr. Jones, just for clarification, SB 946 does not apply to food trucks, right? That this is just for people or businesses with or street vendors with push carts and stationary stands, correct?
As far as I understand, that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Just to, have further clarification on the food trucks, a lot of the food trucks that do park along the sidewalks, people are congregated on the sidewalks accessing the food truck, so that doesn't constitute a public right of way issue?
So they're in the public right of way in the street, but they're not impacting themselves. Their infrastructure is not being impacted by the actual vehicle. So when the people are in the street, it's a little different. It would be great if they didn't, block the right of way and have, I don't know, cafe style tables and chairs and things like that. So, yeah, a little different.
Well, I want to mention like when she said on the sidewalk, we have a right of way for handicaps and wheelchairs, which requires 36 inches of right of way. So, but all these people are blocking it. And I see when it comes unsafe is when people has to go on wheelchair on the street, which now all walking people that are on the street now becoming dangers for pedestrians on the street, where the cars are going through 35 miles an hour. So I think we have an issue because in the sidewalks that we have on Florence, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's but somewhere between 3 and 5 feet. They don't have more. So you cannot put a stand in there and have a space. You might have it in the middle and commingle with the transit, but a lot of people goes in there and wait for food. That's blocking the right of way. And personally, I think that according to, I'm reading here in some of the papers at SB 946, and it's basically saying that we cannot block the street. So the police kind of need to remove or make sure that we have the right of way. And I want to say that I'm not against the food people, because if I want to mention one place that I used to eat about 40 years ago over there in 3rd Street and Long Beach Freeway. I don't want to say the name of the big taco company, but they used to have a lunch truck, and we used to be a big line at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they used to have a restrooms in there, so you can go and wash your hands for the people who's cooking and the people who's going, and they had parking lots. And they start very small. I mean, they are big now, but they start very small. And I think we have this problem in our minds that we have to allow and break the law and infringe everybody's rights just to allow some people to start the business. I think we should be a little open-minded, and I'm talking about in general, to help the people to get it right, even if it's small and legal, and not do it illegally. Because I see the places in Rosecrans and Atlantic. You really want to see all the trash and the way they trash the neighborhood over there. I welcome everybody to go over there and drive through them. And I see some places in East LA where they done it very good, but they still illegal. They still blocking the streets and the sidewalks. And I don't believe that that's the way that we should do it. But I just want to make that a little notation in there that I see here that we need to stop it and try to help somehow the people. We have small places that they can rent, maybe help it a little bit in the beginning. The city maybe helping it. I mean, we have a lot of business that might go big, which is okay. I'm very happy for, but I don't see it where they go and put a taco vendor that doesn't pay no fees and right in front of the Easter, where we have a taco that opens 24 hours a day. And they put it right in front of there, and these people are not paying no fees at all. And they're not, in any way, we know who they are. So I don't think that's fair. That's the only thing I'm saying, that we should take a little bit different approach, but we need to stop it because in Florence, I hope we will never have to see that people run over because of this. Too many people.
Yeah, agreed. Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you for bringing that up. Just as a point of clarification, and I appreciate you looking at SB 946, the cities, including Bell Garden, are not permitted to remove street vendors, right? So if there is an ADA violation, for instance, and there's blockage, they can issue a notice of violation, they can issue an administrative citation, which is a fine. But beyond that, the cities are limited. They cannot actually confiscate their equipment nor put a lien on their property. And those two items are being removed currently or considering to be removed under the Muni Code. So I just want to make that point of clarification. Under state law, that is not permissible to remove a street vendor. It would have to be a county enforcement or some other regulatory agency.
And finally, I'll add that Director Romo did mention locational requirements to the state, and they declined to include those in their legislation as well.
Well, and I wanna also express that we as a planning commission are requiring all the restaurants in the city to obey many laws and make it higher for them to do business. And to do the service. And to be honest with you, we have places that compete the prices with the street vendors. But one of the things I'm not understanding is because the SB and attorney, I want to make a little clarification on 946. It says right here what the city or the local authorities can do, which is limited hours of operation, prohibit stationary sidewalks bending in residence areas, prohibit sidewalks bending near farmers markets, swap meet, and temporarily special permit areas, requires sanitary conditions. So those are things that we can do legally. Require vendors to comply with the American with Disability Acts. I mean, this is on writing. We cannot go around. I mean, as much as I like the vendors, we have to take care of the business that we have, the people who pay the taxes for maintaining the city, Christ said, the business. And I don't see it that we are right now doing it. I would like to see why you said you cannot do these things if the law are saying that you are allowed to do, even require a permit or a license or request certain information about the business operation. I mean, it's right here on the law. So please tell me if that's true or not, or I'm reading the wrong paper.
So SB 946 requires that the county, LA County issues the permits. It is the street vendor who is educated on occasion, either by the county or the city or on their own, how to receive a county health permit. Once they receive the health permit, then they would come to the city and receive their permit. At this time, and from my understanding from the director, is that they have received, I think, maybe less than 5, if even that, applicants for sidewalk vending. I think it's maybe 1. So where I want to remind you that tonight, as far as the planning commission goes, this is a receive and file type of update from the city council to the planning commission as far as the ordinance, the municipal code, and how it is being in compliance with SB 946. It is subject to robust conversations, and opinions are valued. But for this evening, I do want to remind the commission that this is for an update, and if there's particular items to speak with members of the council or with the director of community development, as far as activities, those are definitely noteworthy discussions. But the city's ordinance is in the works of being in compliance with SB 946. And if
And-
there's any points of questions or confusion, I'm happy to address those.
Yes, and I'm taking notes for our director, so we're passing along what you guys are saying. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Commissions? Any more questions?
Yes, I have a question. I saw that in the report that one of the major concerns from the vendors is the cost and the application process. Do you know if there are any resources or any guidance being offered by our city staff? Like how can they help our, these vendors, obtain compliance? What can the city do to help them out? And
Yeah, so far, we've got the directive from our director to just be as aiding as we can. And so again, that's essentially with context to the county and seeing what we can do to help them through their process based on the information that's already on the website or just in the general public's knowledge. So sometimes there's just a street vendor that just doesn't know how to navigate the process, and we're there to help them. So that's what the flyer is going to do, and help them know they can contact us as well.
thank you.
Any more questions? Might have a motion to receive and file this report.
Motion to receive and file this report.
In a second.
I second the motion.
Secretary, give me a roll call just for standard.
Sure. Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Rosa,
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Villalobos,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes, thank you. Number 3, proposed Bell Gardens pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure improvements. Presentations will be given by Stephen Jones, city planner again.
Again, Chair Rivera and Commissioners, my name for the record again is Stephen Jones, and this discussion item was placed on the agenda to respond to the Commission's directive for a review of mobility and connectivity in and with Bell Gardens and surrounding jurisdictions. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission receive this report as well. Objectives for this discussion are to discuss how our EJ element status update evolve into these mobility concerns, consider ways to facilitate a effort to increase public safety, and receive a presentation from our city engineer on complete streets. So just to recap our EJ discussion for the element that we're updating or creating for environmental justice, sparked mobility and connectivity concerns. We talked about how a public participation plan and indicators memo would be forthcoming. And we actually have that to share with you today. These items are linked because as we discuss active transportation, for example, last week we talked about how if you're riding your bike, first of all, there's not a lot of connectivity there, but secondly, you're probably breathing in particulate matter from the 710 and from the trucks and things like that. So just wanted to go over how we made those connections. And additionally, we don't want to conflate the two issues, but we do want to ensure that they both have their due attention. So our staff reached out for assistance from the experts, one from, again, our city engineer and the director of public works. And 2, we reached out to pedestrian and bicyclist safety groups. And we talked with one group called the Cal Walks group. And they typically look at speaking to residents and businesses and groups in the cities and other jurisdictions to help promote best practices and maybe even finding funds for completing infrastructure projects that would improve mobility and public safety. So before I turn it over to Doug and Grisel, just give you a little bit of information and share the flyer we got with that one from the CPBST folks. We're going to share that flyer on the screen in just a moment. So again, it's the Community Pedestrian and Bicycle Training Program. It's a joint project with UC Berkeley, and the California Walks or Cal Walks group. Funding for this program is provided by a grant from the California Office of Traffic Safety through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So this program works with local neighborhoods, residents, and health and transportation advocates to understand the community's walking and biking safety concerns and advance their pedestrian and bicycle safety goals. They work with groups to strengthen collaboration between partners, discuss transportation safety information, and local crash data, and collectively develop a community-driven safety action plan. Their team works with local committees, and in this case, it would be appropriate for the Planning Commission or planning staff to forward the information to our Department of Public Works and the Traffic and Safety Commission, should they see fit to work with them and figure out ways to improve public safety where pedestrians and bicyclists are concerned. So are concerned. So the information is available. I'll email it to you guys so that you have it, but I also just put my name and the commission's names as points of contact. So if you do get emails, it's not spam, it's about public safety. And again, what we'll most likely do is after you receive and file a report is forward the information to our Department of Public Works and the the Traffic and Safety Commission for further action. The other thing I wanted to do before we turn it over to Doug and Grisel is to show you the public participation plan from our Impact Sciences consultant for the environmental justice. Figured I'd just do this now really quickly and just let you know the plan is to speak to residents, businesses, and community groups through education and surveying at community events and focus groups throughout this year, through the summer at the very least. Proposed stakeholders include community groups and city departments, businesses, religious institutions, and schools. So that's everybody from, the Joe and Mary down the street to Big Five, to the schools, to the Recreation and Community Services Department, handing out flyers at the summer events and the Easter events and things that are going on in the city that are already annual events or semi-regular, the farmers markets, handing out what we expect to be completed in terms of surveys to figure out what environmental justice means to the residents for the most effective community engagement. And then we also have the indicators memo where appropriate indicators are referenced. We will be emailing you guys this so that you can just see it and provide further feedback in writing or via phone, or however you want to do it in the future. It would indicate that reducing pollution exposure, having access to healthy food, and promoting physical activity are anticipated to be end goals in the policies and programs that we look to have in the environmental justice element. And all that's coming before you, obviously, in draft form in the coming months. But the participation plan to speak to residents, businesses, and community groups, and the indicators memo, which would, again, appropriate or speak about what's appropriate indicators for an environmental justice element, are coming to you via email. And then with that, I will let Doug and Grisel, Doug Benash, our city engineer, and Grisel Chavez, our director of public works, take it for their presentation on complete streets. Doug?
I'm here. If Grisel has any comments before I proceed, I'll carry forward from that standpoint. But let's give a little background. Our complete streets plan was adopted by council back in February of 2020. And this was a process that began with a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant with the purpose to provide the city guidance on how to improve walking, biking, and transit experiences through context-sensitive and implementable complete streets improvements. In the process, when you look at complete streets, we see how we can incorporate safer pedestrian designs, accessibility for bicyclists and transit riders, and then also accommodate the motorists in the existing traffic patterns and street networks that we have in town. We try to take a holistic approach and try to bring things to the table that will make safety a priority, and also try to make it to where people are walking and biking more. But that is basically what a complete street is. Is the presentation available?
Let's check on that, Doug. I don't, did you send it to us or did Veronica send it?
I think Veronica sent it over, and I also resent it, I thought maybe. I didn't get it.
Okay, yeah.
Alright.
We didn't get-
But we have a presentation to council can be made available after the meeting if you want to take a look at it. But this program became prominent back in 2017 when I think Metro, through some of their funding requirements, wanted cities to implement complete street programs, primarily implemented by the bicycle lobbies to get, to where if you want to use Measure M, Measure R, Prop C funds in your jurisdiction, you had to have a complete streets plan in place. That's probably the impetus for it, and we were able to get a grant in order to do this. So this plan was developed in a fashion where we took our existing inventory of conditions, we engaged the community, and then we analyzed data to come up with a plan. Those all come into play where we had 4 community meetings beginning in 2018, working through 2019 when there was, and then with a final, and then with some council member study sessions, and all our community meetings were bilingual, and bilingual surveys were issued to the community, and we had and those were returned. The 71.6% of the participants from the survey indicated they travel by vehicles. 45.3% of the participants felt the cars drive too fast on the streets. Most intersections were identified as unsafe. On the high volume corridors, Eastern, Clara, and Gage were the most frequently identified as unsafe. So how do we address this? We address this in a number of fashions when we come up with a complete street program, where we can install bulb outs at the intersections of stop signs. Speed humps, speed tables can be incorporated into the areas, which, if you've been aware, some of the streets in town do have speed humps in them to mitigate speed based on what that neighborhood or that block of residents have requested. We look at roundabouts to slow people down, also make it a little more safer for pedestrians and so forth. Those are the things we're trying to implement. We're trying to settle corridors to do this. Now, this plan that we developed allowed us to go after active transportation grants through Caltrans. And we are in the process now. We've received basically the Cycle 5, ATP Cycle 5 grant for about $5.5 million. We have began the design process of that. And I think that's primarily Habanera, the Habanera corridor, and I think Speck and Watcher, that neighborhoods are our target areas for that phase 1. We don't have preliminary plans yet, but we're in the process of developing those. And we will also have community meetings to make sure the community that we implement these devices are in place. Because if you start taking bulb outs and doing things of that nature, there will be impacts to parking. And of course, we all know that in Bell Gardens, parking is a premium. So as with all these engineering decisions and engineering designs, we got to balance. It's a balancing act with the community to make sure they have buy-in on that. So that's our goal. And then to initiate a phase 2 of this program, we also received a Cycle 6 award for ATP Cycle 6 grant funds for the second phase of the project. That's going to take about a year or so in order for us to get the funding agreements in place before you even get access to that money to start the process. But this has been what we have done as far in trying to increase bicycle mobility and pedestrian mobility. With the West Santa Ana branch, we've been trying to actively get a pedestrian crossing across the freeway through the Edison right-of-way and across the LA River into Cudahy or close to Southgate, where the West Santa Ana branch, it's not called that anymore for some other reasons, but that train station there at Southgate, Atlantic, and Firestone. But those things bridges are very expensive, and trying to find funding and grant agreements for that. So maybe we'll do some focusing on that area as one crossing, and maybe in a second area of expanding or putting a pedestrian crossing at the Clara Street bridges across the freeway in the LA River. So it's kind of where we're headed with this from an engineering standpoint. Knowing that now that there's a whole new thing with environmental justice, we'll incorporate those things into our action plan as required. This is where we're headed right now as we speak regarding bicycle and pedestrians. And I'll entertain any questions.
I would really like to look at that PowerPoint. It's too bad we don't have it. But when will it be available to us to look at?
It'll be emailed later today.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get it to you.
Commissions? More questions? I just, so can we have some, I don't know how, if we wanna do more work on this one, or I'd rather see something get done quick, like, I can go from here to down and bicycle over there. They have a bicycle road all the way to just about goes to Lakewood, and then it goes to Long Beach, all the way to the beach. But here we don't have it. So if you say it's unsafe, can we do it like in Florence or the main streets and leave the housings or where there's problems with the parking for more study? But I just don't wanna, I don't wanna be in a cemetery and hopefully trying to work this deal out. It's been so long. So we can ride the bicycles like 30 years ago.
We did have a Cycle 4 ATP project. That we did some safety, some ADA improvements in some of the intersections, and we also put what they call sharrows in the pavement of Florence, Garfield, Gage, and Eastern, primarily in order to indicate that the roadway is available for bicyclists. The reality is, gross vehicle weight wins in this world. And so bicycling with, if you want dedicated routes, we lose parking for dedicated bicycle lanes. So, we try to weigh things accordingly. But we do have, Florence is designated with sharrows for cyclists to use. And that's also given an identity, the motorist has to be taken into account that they're out there in the roadway also.
So, as a cyclist myself, and I do ride the streets of Bell Gardens, and I, on Garfield and all of the major streets that have the sharrows, I do have concerns about, taking parking away and things like that. I'm not in favor of that. As much as I love to ride my bike, I'm not in favor of that. But I feel like the bigger thing that we could do within the city is to develop more of an education program for city residents. And maybe, I don't know, it's got to be more of an education program, because there are laws that protect cyclists. There are laws about sharing the road, and frankly, neither drivers nor cyclists are aware of them. And so we have the sharrows in place where we can put bike lanes in. I think it would be great where we can get alternative routes to the major streets like Florence. I would never ride Florence to go into either Downey or Bell. It's just not. Last month I was at the meeting in the city of Bell talking about the improvements that they're trying to make right there by the bicycle casino for pedestrian improvements. They were talking about a bicycle bridge that's something like, I don't know, $10 million to build a bicycle bridge. And it still isn't, even building that bridge isn't a solution either, because at the end of that bridge, you're back on the street. There is no bike lane. There is no safe passage through the rest, continuing on to Florence. So I think that yes, we should have more bike lanes and more routes that will take people off of some of the main streets where possible. But I also think that it's really important for the city to develop some sort of an education campaign, with signage along the streets of, how to properly share the road. I mean, most drivers don't know that if you're on a 2-lane road and you see a cyclist in the right lane, they are no longer required to share the road with you. You must change lanes to pass them up if you're on a 2-lane road. Most drivers are not aware of that. Also, most drivers are not aware of that if it's a single lane road in one direction, cyclists are not required to share the road with the car if it is not safe for the car to pass. So these are some of the things that I think that we really need to develop within the city. Have some sort of an educational campaign. And, but yes, I'm all for bike lanes. I'm all for bike lanes where it's feasible and where it makes sense.
I think, from an educational standpoint, there are things we can do, but I will preface this by saying that I've had to deal with this at school area traffic. And the most effective way is, you educate the parents and we put signs appropriately for the manual uniform.
Sorry, you're freezing up.
To do though. Sorry.
You froze up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now. I think you mentioned something about education. Just let me jump in real quick and say that I neglected to mention the best part about the community pedestrian and bicycle training program, safety training program. It's free. And so they work with collaborative groups. They would come into the schools, come into the community. Again, as long as there's advocates like you and others that would be able to be on a committee, they work with the community, the city for free to figure out what kind of actions need to take place. They help compile it into a plan. And that's where, once that plan is in place, they even help finding funding that grants and things could help to fund some of the improvements that are recommended in the plan. And so this discussion item is again for you to receive and file. And I'm taking notes, and we're going to do the appropriate thing and pass it along to the Public Works Department and that Traffic and Safety Committee. And they'll be hearing, from the program and us as well. Doug, I don't know if you're back online, but
Am I back online?
there you go.
Yeah, I was just indicating from an education standpoint, we had to do some work around the school areas, which is always problematic for the pickup and drop offs. We've all experienced over the last 30 years. So, but that program works best when you have the three pieces of education, enforcement, and engineering. From an engineering standpoint, we put the devices in that the motorists follow and the kids and the parents follow. We have the enforcement arm from the police department that they enforce those signage and stopping sign issues in that area. And the schools have to educate the parents and the children on how to operate and get to pick up your kids. You lose any one of those legs and the system falls apart. So, we can put as much stuff out in the street, we can paint, we can put signs up. And if we don't have enforcement or we don't have education, it goes nowhere. So it is a multifaceted thing. I apologize, we're mostly engineers, we're not quite the educators per se, but it sounds like Steven's got an angle on that action. But we can provide you we can get you the proper signage and what we have to do to get the thing implemented. So.
Hey, commissions. Well, one more question I would like to say is, since you in charge of the street, maybe we can find out. I noticed inside of the streets you can park and you can make bicycle lane and then the traffic lane. Do we have a way that we can do something like that just to get out? I mean, if we find one street, then we can do that and make it so we can move in and out of the city. That probably would work, to find solutions like that. Because I see other cities, they doing that. They have the parking for the car, the bicycle road next, and then the traffic. Maybe it has to do with people like you. They can know the numbers and they can put everything together as far as the law and whatever we need to have. But it would be nice if you can tell us maybe in the future and see if we can do something like that in our city.
Well, we got a Metro grant for some improvements along the Clare Street corridor from the west city limits to the east city limits. And that's probably the biggest candidate to get interconnection, where you have a little lower volume streets to work on. And as part of the design process, we can go through and see if the math works. And if we either have to come up with some other money to see about making changing the parkways to make them smaller to make it fit, we'll see what we can do. But it boils down to money.
And also one more request, sorry. Within that planning, one thing that I have found is that cities often will have their own master plan, their cycling, their master plan for bike lanes and things like that. But once you get to the city limit, it doesn't necessarily continue into the next city. And so I think it's really important that when we're looking at creating these corridors, that we look at to see what our neighboring cities have already done to make sure that we can connect those.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any commissions, any more questions? If not, I'm gonna look for a motion to file and to receive and file this report.
I move that we receive and file this report.
I second that motion.
We have a second and we have a motion. I'll give you a roll call, please, Erica.
Sure. Commissioner Marcena,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Rosa,
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Villalobos,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes. Thank you. Next item will be public comment on non-agenda items. Erica, will you
Sure.
announce the instructions for the public participation?
The members of the public now have an opportunity to speak on items not listed on the Planning Commission agenda. Please state your name for the record. Each speaker and written comments are limited to 3 minutes. Callers wishing to make a comment may do so at this time by dialing *9 from your phone. When instructed, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Individuals joining through the Zoom app may request to make a comment by using the raise hand feature on Zoom and select to unmute or the microphone icon when instructed. And Chairperson, we do not have anyone in the public, nor do we have anyone wishing to speak on any item not on the agenda.
Thank you. If there is no objection by the planning commission, I will close the public comments. No objection, close. Next item will be the staff comments.
Thank you, Chair. We've covered a lot of what the staff comments were already. So with environmental justice element, you'll be getting in the email, the public participation plan and the indicators memo. That again goes over what the proposal is to have a meaningful and full environmental justice element that speaks to the community in the best way possible. The Art in Public Places Ordinance was introduced at the May 13th City Council meeting, and the council gave intent or signaled their intent to approve in the second reading. So that's coming up soon. And the rent stabilization, tenant eviction, and tenant eviction protection RFP is on hold. We ran into a couple of challenges with the consultant or the recommended consultant and the professional services agreement. So we're looking at making another recommendation in the coming weeks to make sure that the rental registry fee study gets off as soon as possible. And then finally, for biweekly highlights, I would add that we've filed for 2 grants on March 9th with the Caltrans organization for the state. So the Sustainable Communities for Climate Adaptation grant is for us to complete a climate action plan. And the transit-oriented community work that we're proposing could be funded by the other grant, which is for Sustainable Communities for Transportation Planning. So these grants are going to be very helpful for us to, as a small city and with few staff, get a couple of meaningful documents together to facilitate housing production, to facilitate all levels of affordability and appropriate transportation and transit access. So those things happened on March 9th, and that concludes staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissions, any comments? Commissions, any comments? Sorry, I didn't have the mic.
Comments about what Stephen just talked about?
Any
All right.
comments in general from the commissions?
Well, I mean, I don't know that this is the appropriate venue, but I'm putting it out there and hopefully it'll get to the right people. The state of California right now has a $10 million grant program to help people who are at 300% of the federal poverty level and 225% of the federal poverty level to purchase e-bikes. There's, I believe it's $1,000 that that people can apply for to help them purchase e-bikes. So I don't know if the city is aware of that. It seems that the program is going to be open for applications Q2. They were thinking sometime in April, but I think it's something that the city should be on top of. And maybe, I don't know if we can promote it within the city to help people apply for those grants. I can send you some information, some links and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Any other comments? No, we don't have no more, so I just want to say thank you. This meeting has been a little informative for everybody. I think we need to, we probably need to have a little more public meetings like on the park, so some of the public attend, so you can feel and see what the public wants in a city. We are a small city, but we are kind of demanding. I hear a lot of people where they have a lot of stuff that they need to ask. So hopefully in the future we can bring more business, because we make so many of these not business friendly. We're gonna lose quite a few business. So no more questions. I need a motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, the motion to adjourn.